And it's so funny. From a CRM perspective, we see it all the time. We're selling our product to dealers every month, and we say to them, during the times that we're demoing and communicating where we're really going, do you have documented processes for all of your different things? Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. So then we sign them up, and we do our welcome calls and start communicating, and we say, great, so remember when we talked about on our demo those processes? Could you please, send us over copies of your current processes for third-party leads, website leads, phone, inbound, outbound, zone control? They go, oh, no, wait, no, we don't have any of that. And I go, okay. So, but then some are like, absolutely, already in your inbox. So then how do you help those dealers that are, lack of, and then the ones that have them? Because what's interesting is, and sometimes we think about this, the guy that sends them over to you right away, does that necessarily mean that his processes are good or bad? And as a CRM company, we have to stay agnostic in that conversation. We could point out suggestions. But once again, some process is better than no process, but then if you don't have a process, can we help you create one? The answer to that question is also yes. But again, do you have these things? And then lastly, technology. Say that again, lastly, technology. And what technologies do you have? How do they integrate? How do you communicate? How do you measure? Which I saw a great presentation just a minute ago by Gary May about measure, 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 which I agree with 100%. And I come back with drill, drill, drill. So you have these great people, and you have these great processes. How often do you practice? How often do you review? And do you need necessarily technology to accomplish that? You don't. See, when I first started selling cars, and by the way, it doesn't matter how I sell cars, but I will reference that from time to time. We started with a recipe book, right? And then alphabetical paper, right? And then little index cards. That was my first BDC. Sold 200 cars a month out of that BDC for a Chevy store in Phoenix. Just like that. So, you don't necessarily need the most fancy tool in the world sometimes. It's about the people and the process. So, going back to that, here we see these really lovely ladies, and they're navigating in airplanes. Let me ask you a question. Did it work? I bet it did. I bet they landed planes and they got them in just fine. But the question, the challenge is, of course, if we had a setup like this, what are some of the words that we could put together with a setup like this versus the ladies that we saw before? Well, I'd like to say efficiency. Right? Efficiency would be a big thing. And then being able to go beyond your comfort zone and then integrate with things beyond maybe what you currently do. Now, those are things that technology companies like mine should do and be open to and be helpful with and work with the culture and the processes that you have in place, no matter how good or how bad. That's a CRM company's responsibility. And so we don't personally think that that is the way it is, but that's the way it is with us. And to me, this is a great, ideal, desired state, but it doesn't actually have to be your current. And we really crawl, walk, run. So you don't always have to buy it all. Just buy what you need and buy what works. And then add on little pockets and pieces of technology to expand what it is you're trying to accomplish visually. See, I always had this crazy theory, and it works so well. Mr. Miller of the Learning Organization, God rest his soul, really bought into it, which is don't drive traffic until you have people and the process in place to get the results you're looking for. Then drive the traffic. Then drive it. Because other than that, it's a waste of money. Because just because you drive and have the most leads doesn't mean you're going to sell the most cars. You may have the highest cost per sale, but is your cost per sale per se better or worse in a different market? It's kind of hard to judge. It's just based on what you're looking to get out of it and what's your strategy. And then having a company that is like-minded, but then gets real granular with you and communicate with, this is what we're really trying to do. How do we get there? And how do we measure it? And that's something that we really believe in. So the question becomes, with the right people and process and technology, and of course continuous improvement training, which we believe in heavily, can air disasters be avoided? So going back to that air traffic control mentality, if we did that and drill all the time, we have the right people, we have the right processes of how to run our air traffic control tower, and all this activity going on, and drill all the time, could we avoid air traffic disasters? Well, yes. And that's what happens today. And that's why there's so many, so few, I should say, of air traffic control disasters, because of all this stuff going on with the FAA and standards and all these different things. So what about our world? What's the FAA in our world? Do we have one? Do we have benchmarks that we all look at all the time that you're communicating about to make sure that you are doing those things? So we talk about the personnel involved. We have, of course, the air traffic control tower. We then have the ground crew, which, in my opinion, is the salespeople. You have the ground supervisor, which, in my opinion, is the sales manager, who's a very intricate piece in today's sales processes. And then the pilot. The pilot's the customer. The pilot is the guy that's in charge. That's the guy we need to make happy. So what are the 4 C's, in my personal opinion, to help as far as efficiency, as far as people and process, and then assist with the technology? Number 1, communication. What is the communication between your air traffic control tower and your pilot that filters through your ground supervisor? Are there what I like to call bottlenecks? Are there things that go on in your store that inhibit you to have proper communication? Example. Customer says before they will come in, they want a value on their current vehicle. So, of course, in most of our stores, the salespeople are not allowed to give out that information, or maybe some of you do. Again, it depends on your process. And the sales manager has to get involved and communicate a number. So the salesperson goes to that man and a lady, and they say, I need to get a number, and they say classically, just tell them to come in, and we'll appraise the vehicle and give them a number. Or we'll give them a range, or something to that effect. And then the salesperson goes back and gives them that information that doesn't quite what the customer was wanting, so it creates a bottleneck. It slows down the process. Well, I humbly believe that we eliminate those as much as possible, through technology if possible, but if not, it's just about what I would say, again, lead intensity, lead focus, awareness of hyper-intense involvement. Your sales managers are your best closers. That's why we pay them the most money. That's why they're in charge of leading sales teams. Why are they not communicating the information to the pilot directly? Why not? It's kind of sometimes still unheard of, but it is the most efficient way to get the end result, which is get the customer in. At times, the managers want to have that 1 degree of separation. I totally appreciate that, but doing it differently is what makes you unique and stand out amongst your competitors. Cooperation. Going back to that same scenario. Are we cooperating on both sides? Is that happening? Now, through technology is great, but without technology, take technology out of the scenario. Are we doing our absolute best in our process to communicate and cooperate in the transaction? Or are we creating bottlenecks? Bottlenecks are no good. The last thing I did for the Larry Miller organization was work on time. Time of a transaction. When Mr. Miller died, a couple months before, he flew us all to Salt Lake, and he said, I have a dream. Because the dream is I would love to be able to have transactions take from start to finish 2 hours. And everybody in the room, whoa, 2 hours. And this is a dream, it's what I've always liked to do. He goes, how can we build a process and a system in our stores to do that? First thing is we analyzed the data, we collected a lot of data, and we found out the average transaction time start to finish in the dealership, regardless of the point of entry, whether it be phone, internet, showroom, was an average of still 5.5 hours. Some are more, some are less. How are we going to cut that down? Well, the 2 things I took from that was time kills deals, time kills gross. Was there anyone in this room that would disagree with that? Nobody? Okay. So based on that, I said, well, he's on to something. Makes sense to me. So how can we utilize people, process, and technology to shrink that down? What are we going to do to better communicate, cooperate, correlate, and finally compensate our people to achieve the goal? So we started looking at different areas of the transaction. We started looking at different pieces of technology to plug in to speed things up. So like one of the things, just off the top of my head, was Viava, about sending an automatic notification for a trade-in. So our used car manager was what we call hyperly aware that something needed to get accomplished. So he would engage. And then we created an analogy in our store, which is don't page, engage. About speeding things up and getting involved and communicating with customers from hello. I had the pleasure of watching a presentation a month ago by a gentleman by the name of Danny. And the number one thing he said was, which I totally agree with, is just get involved. Have the manager communicate with the customer from hello, and in the middle, and in the end if necessary, but have that manager involved as early as possible, which was a huge part of what we designed at Larry Miller to move things along as quickly and efficiently as possible. So an ideal BDC in your dealership environment. Why am I up here talking about this? I didn't cover the last time in this presentation. Who am I to speak on a BDC? Totally legit question. And I'm so glad someone asked that. For the Larry Miller organization, we created a centralized BDC for 9 stores. We had 120 call agents. We had 6 managers and a director. And we were making all types of follow-up and prospecting calls for our dealerships inside of Phoenix, Arizona. So by design, we felt like this was the right way to do it, and we were going to cut all the dealerships off of all communication with all customers until they reached the dealership. And this was back in 2006. So this was unheard of back then. It was like, what are you guys talking about? And it was just an idea of how we could cut down time and create efficiency and drive more traffic to the stores, and have the stores do what they did best, which was close. And have salespeople do what's best, which is sell cars. And, crazy idea, I know. But, so we started doing it. So then we started thinking about what kind of culture we want to establish with this. And the first thing we said was, which was a great question, because we had all these general managers in the room once, and we said, are you aware of all of your leads? We did this amazing exercise. We had them all take a piece of poster board and said, okay, no one cheat, and everybody write down every lead in your store that you can think about. Do you think anyone had the same list? No, they did not. Some guys were way further on than others. Some guys didn't even have a clue. It's okay. But we were there to spread the information. So the first thing is, in your stores, and then obviously in your process, and then eventually in your technology, are you aware of all of your leads? Do you know where every one of your leads come from? Are you aware where you can create opportunity, create process, have people, and become effective and sell more vehicles? Crazy, right? But again, get to your ideal closing ratio without having to drive additional traffic.